All right, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about an interesting topic. People that are not on this one are going to miss out on some interesting stuff that we're going to cover. MJ talking about difficulty reaching COs, called several times, no return. We'll talk about that today. It's one of the things we'll talk about today. I'll make sure we do. We're going to be talking about how to interview a BD person, and before we actually get into that, there's something I want to teach you that will work in every aspect of your life, but it's going to work really well in business. And I'll give you some examples on how to do this. When I talk about interviewing people, I think it's really important, especially when you're interviewing salespeople. I think it's really important to understand how to tell when people are lying. And I promised you last week that I would teach you all how to be kind of like a human lie detector a little bit. And so that's kind of the first part of this. Before we get into how to interview BD people, I want to teach you a little bit on how to tell when people are lying. And I'm not going to do this with anyone on here because number one, I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, but because it will definitely make you uncomfortable to know this stuff. But it's really, really simple. So your brain is kind of split in two. And you've probably all seen cop shows or detective shows where somebody's answering questions and they're like, oh, they're lying. They looked up and to the left. That's not true. You will look a direction, but it's different for everybody. So like maybe Tom, when he's lying, looks up and to the left or down and to the left. But maybe when I do it, I'm looking up and to the right. It's a little bit different. Now, the up, down, middle doesn't matter. What matters is the direction, left or right. So in order to tell when somebody's lying, what we do is we ask two questions. We ask a baseline question of something we know pretty certain they're going to tell the truth about unless they're just really embarrassed. And then the second question we ask is something where they've got to create an answer, which is basically where lies come from. So my go-to a lot of times is to ask kind of three questions. Actually, I'll say like Tom, what was your last big birthday? And Tom may say, my last big birthday was my 40th or whatever it was. And I'll say, well, Tom, what did you do for your 40th birthday? And he'll look a certain direction. And you're like, oh yeah, my wife took me here and we did this and we did that. And it was a lot of fun. Okay, cool. So now I know if he's looking to the left, he's most likely telling the truth. So then I ask the next question. I'm like, hey, Tom, your 50th is coming up. If you could do anything in the world, what would you do for your 50th? And he's probably going to pause and think. And if I did the first question right, he's going to look to the right. And that's going to confirm to me that when the person is not telling the truth, they're going to look to the right. Because I have my baseline truth question and my other question, they're going to look two different directions. So I'll just recap that for you. So we're trying to ask them something we're fairly certain they're going to tell the truth about. And then we ask them something that we know they don't have an answer about unless they've just obsessed about it. So like if Tom has been obsessing about his 50th birthday for the last 10 years, then he may go to this thing that he's created, right? But typically if they pause and they think about it, then we're pretty sure it's a brand new memory, which is equivalent to a lie. And so when we get into asking questions of somebody, and we know when they're looking to the left, they're telling the truth, and we're looking to the right, they're lying. When we get into questions like, so how long do you think it's going to take for you to be successful in this role? And they look the direction of the lie because they're making something up. Well, we know they're probably not believing their answer. Or, we ask them something along the lines of, well, how do you handle rejection? And they have to make something up. We know they're probably telling a lie. Are you good at this or that? And I typically will ask open-ended questions. So I stay away from the yes and no's as much as possible. Now, some people are really good at this. And if they're on video, it's really difficult to do that test because some people are just locked in on their camera. And if they're locked in on their camera, you're going to have to be able to read a micro expression really, really fast of them looking away or whatever. And that's really, really difficult. But in person, they're typically more relaxed. They're actually not prone to look directly at you. And it's usually a little bit easier to do those kind of tests in person. But that's a really quick way to tell, are they telling the truth or they're lying? I actually used this the other day. I had somebody who was actually In the other role, they were interviewing for a job and they knew the person who was in the previous role was actually one of their best friends. And she had told them all kind of stuff that had happened at the company. And she was like, I don't know if she's being dramatic or if they're really this bad. I'm like, well, let's figure out if they're lying. And then you ask them a question. So what made the last person in this role unsuccessful? And sure enough, when they asked, they gave this string of lies that were really easy to decipher. But she's like, now I knew after that I couldn't work there. And she turned down the job. So I spent the 40th birthday at home. Come on, man. You should have been out there living it up. So yeah, that it's just a really good way. This works on your kids, works on your spouse, which you may or may not want to use. And it works in all kind of different roles. I've even used it in teaming meetings. I've used it in coaching calls where I've been in different meetings and I'm talking to somebody and I'm trying to get into like what's going on. I've used it with contracting officers as you're building rapport, and then you're asking questions and you're like, man, I just don't feel like I'm getting to the truth. And you can go deeper into that for another session. This is just in general to figure out, like, if I'm interviewing somebody, are they telling me the truth or are they making this up? That's really what it's about. So let me get into some questions. And we have a whole bunch of stuff inside Federal Access today on how to interview BD people, like rockstar BD people and that kind of stuff. You can go in there and look at those questions. There's some really good stuff in there, how to find them, all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to take a little bit different spin today because I was actually doing this with someone. He's like, I've read all your stuff. Is there anything else? I'm like, I got some other stuff. So here's the other stuff that's not in the system. And I'm going to do an article on this probably this weekend, and we'll have all that stuff posted as well. So there'll be some follow-up material. Number one question that I want to ask somebody, and this kind of goes into are they telling the truth, is, are you coachable? And if so, can you give me an example of that? Really simple question, but I want to know if the person that I'm actually working with or going to be working with, I want to know if they can take constructive criticism. I want to know if when I'm working with them in that first, 30, 60, 90 days, are they going to be able to handle me going back and forth and trying to kind of mold them into our system? Or are they going to come in and just know it all and be difficult to work with? So are you coachable? And give me an example. So they could say yes to, oh yeah, I'm coachable, but can you give me an example? And if they're struggling with examples, you can ask them things like, well, maybe there was something difficult in your last job where maybe you agreed, didn't agree, or your supervisors tried to make a correction. Like, how did that go? What was the issue and how did that go? That kind of thing. So you can actually get an example of them being coachable. Like, hey, yeah, I was kind of resistant initially, but after working with, my supervisor, I got a lot of value out of that. So I'm struggling with a sneeze. So if I just stop and sneeze, so that's what it is. So are they coachable? That's the first one. The second question when I'm asking a BD person is, how long is it going to take you to be successful in this role? And whether you've done the lie detector thing or not, the shorter the time frame, the bigger the liar I usually have on my hands, unless they are coming over with a book of business from somewhere, or like, they know everybody because that's how you know them. Like, it's extremely rare to sit with somebody who says, I'm going to be closing deals in 3 months. Like, if they say they're going to be making you money in 3 months, like, just go to the next person. This is just not going to work. They should give you an answer that's more along the lines of, I think it's going to take me about 3 to 5 months to build a really healthy pipeline. And hopefully in that 6-month window, 6 to 9 months, I should be closing some smaller stuff. But I really think it's going to take me a year or so to get to the big stuff, the 7-8 figure deals. I think it's going to take a year, especially if they're new to you, new to the industry, new to the agencies you want to sell, all that kind of stuff. They should be giving you an answer that's more in the 12-month realm than in the 3-month realm. And so that's kind of what we're looking for. That's the honesty we're looking for. The next thing is more of a statement instead of a question. I'll say, so walk me through your business development process. I want to see that they have a system that they're using to do business development? Well, I like to get up every morning and review SAM for about 30, 40 minutes. That's also a thing. Like we want to see they're doing a little bit of SAM or a little bit of the bid matching tool, whatever it is. And they're doing a lot of outbound calling and connecting and stuff like that. And then I spend the rest of the day reaching out to contracting officers, PMs, teaming partners, trying to uncover some opportunities, trying to chase some things, and probably spend a little bit of time, responding to sources sought and that stuff. Oh, excuse me. I'm working on that for like 5 minutes. So that's part of what we want to see, and we want to see their thought process on walk me through your process. What else are they doing? How do they follow up? And you can ask follow-on questions. So you've talked a lot about the pre-acquisition side. How do you follow up on things, and how many times, and walk me through that piece of it. And when do you feel like a lead is dead now and it's not going to go anywhere? And but you want to have them walk you through a process. And if they just keep pointing back to, well, I'm going to learn how you guys do business, I'm going to focus on that, that's just not enough. I want to know that they understand business development and the things they need to do, not just they're going to follow your process. If they lean a lot on your process, it's likely not going to work, because most people don't even have a process internally, or they have a very loose process. You need somebody who has something they're going to follow because they've created it, or it's something that worked in the past, and that's what's helped them, get done. So another question that I will ask is, what is something you learned from a recent rejection or hardship? A couple of reasons I ask this. One is I want them to admit something. Like you admit life's hard, admit work's hard. Like, because again, I'm trying to get some truth out of somebody. And when people say, well, I can't think of the last time I had a hardship. Like, this guy's a liar. Like I just read a book last year called something about navigating transitions in life. And they suggest in the book that the average person navigates some sort of transition or hardship every 3 to 6 months, and has a difficult one approximately every 3 years, and then a big, like, life-changing one every 5 to 7 years. We're always navigating stuff. So if people are sitting in front of you and they're saying, oh, my whole life is super easy, red flag right there. So another question I'll ask is, how do you handle rejection? Now, this job is full of rejection. So there's one of just a couple of ways they're going to handle that. Like, hey, if you get too much of that, then, I need to, go sleep on the couch and eat a bag of Cheetos and, have some pizza. There's that side. And there's people that are like, hey, I feel like every no is one more closer to a yes. And while it may be difficult, I know that it's just part of the job, and I try not to take it personally. Those are two different answers, right? Person that's like just doomsday and spirals. And people will tell you that. People will say, oh, I don't like rejection, and it really bothers me, and whatever. And then some people are like, hey, it's just part of the process. So you can typically judge them. But this is one of the key questions that I want to have done that whole lie detector thing up front, because I will see, are they just giving me a rehearsed line, or are they giving me the truth? Which, by the way, it is difficult when you are interviewing a really good liar, because they likely have gone through a lot of the traditional questions. That's why a lot of the stuff I'm asking here is not traditional. The likelihood of somebody practicing for these particular questions is really, really small. That's why I asked them. So the next one here is, what does success look like for you in this role? I know that's a question that employees or interviewees usually ask the interviewer, but I want you to be able to ask this question to people. What does success look like for you in this role? And there's one of two answers you're likely going to get. These are the most common. You're either going to get, I'm looking to be a great employee and hit my numbers. I want to do a good job, hit my quota. Not super excited about that person. What I really want is somebody that says, I've looked at the compensation plan, and at plan, while I would be happy, I want to destroy it. I want to blow these numbers out of the water because I've got goals and hopes and dreams and that kind of stuff. I want something closer to that end of the spectrum than somebody that's just happy to hit the quota. So that's what we're looking for here. The person that's happy to hit um, the quota is their ceiling. That's their best case scenario is the ceiling, or that ceiling is their best case scenario. And I want somebody that's more along the lines of the floor. They're like, this is the minimum standard to keep your job. I want you to come up here or higher, blow me out of the water here. And so that's why I want to see, what does success look like for you in this role? The next question here, I've only got two more here, and then we can get into questions. So the next question is, how are you at research and analysis? There is no other sales job. I mean, there's a lot of sales jobs that require research analysis, but not like GovCon. And the tools are there for you. So I want to hear from them how good they are at this. Can they connect the dots? I mean, I'm a trained analyst and private investigator. I can connect the dots better than a lot of people can. But can they do it? Can they connect the dots? Do they know how to use Google? Do they know how to use LinkedIn? Do they know how to use ChatGPT to do research? Because you can do a lot of really cool research with ChatGPT. Are you good at research and analysis? If so, tell me how. Like, what are some of the tools you use? How do you go about your research and analysis? You want to know they can connect the dots. Because if you got to connect all the dots for them, that's going to be a problem. The last question that's up here is, what type of support do you need from the company to do your job successfully? So I want to know, does this person need us to buy every tool in the market and give it to them? Will this employee make do with what we have? I want to look for things like, well, I need you to train me on how you guys do business. I need a little bit of grace while I'm figuring this out over the next few months. And then as things come up, I'm probably going to need a little bit of coaching and guidance to get going in the right direction. I want to hear something. I don't want to sit in front of somebody that says, well, I'm just not really sure till I get started what I'm going to need for you guys. Like, they should have an answer to that question, because they should know and have the emotional intelligence and business acumen to be able to say, this is what's going to make me successful. This is the type of support that the company can give me to make me successful. So those are a handful of things for you. How do you tell when somebody's lying? Super, super important. And then the follow-up questions, again, they're different than what's in the system. You can go look in the sales, I believe it's in the sales module or the operations module. And there's a handful of documents on hiring rockstar business developers. And you can learn a little bit more from that. We've also got some podcasts that talk about more traditional questions and things. I ran through those in 15 minutes to get all through that stuff. Obviously, that didn't include all their answers, but you can get to the real meat of some stuff with these questions, and then you can ask them all the other stuff that you would likely ask folks. So